All right, for the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and get started here. This is a longer session today. So, for those of you that haven't been here before, welcome to our customer learning lab. This is our February edition, and today we're doing the WiSys packaging layer. So, who am I and why am I talking to you about this? I'm Chase Linsenbigler. I wanted to leave my camera on to make my introduction. So, hello, welcome. I'm going to turn this off so you don't have to stare at me and you can focus on the screen. So I manage all the partner enablement here at WiSys. A big part of my job is producing content for our users so that, outside of partners, that includes all of our customers, as well as even our own employees who are learning the software first. And making that content, I'm putting a big emphasis on these learning labs here for this year. We'll be doing these the third Tuesday of each month from 2:30 to 3:30 EST. So for those of you that weren't here last time, again, if you want to block off that time slot, if this is something you want to make sure you're available for, we're only sending an email out about a week in advance. So if your schedule fills up quickly and you want to block that off, it'll be the third Tuesday of each month. Prior to doing this, I was a customer facing consultant. So a lot of our customers that join these calls may have worked with me before. And I've used a lot of those skills, over the course of time here with partners to just kind of develop some training materials and things like that on our product. So what are we going over today? Today we're going to cover everything with the WiSys packaging layer. So that's going to start with going over Agility palettes as a product, and then an overview of the WiSys packaging layer as a whole. So a little bit of information on that before we dive deeper on the next slide here. So the WiSys packaging layer, everything I show you today is only available if you have the Agility palettes product, which is a part of our enterprise solution. So all of the things that we're going over here will only be available to enterprise customers. And if you don't have these things available, that's all you'll have to do is upgrade to the enterprise product and you'll have Agility palettes available to you. Then we're going to go over how Agility handles different package types and how to create those package types in the system. After that, we'll talk a little bit about the data that actually resides in the system and our WiSys packaging tables. So of course, with this information not being native to SAP Business One, we use our own tables to track and record package information. Then we're going to talk about the two types of packages that we use in Agility and how to make each of them before ending on talking about interpacking a little bit. So it's a lot of information here today. We're going to try and leave time for questions at the end, but we might be running a little bit short. So some key elements of the WiSys packaging layer, again, it comes with Agility palettes, which is a part of our enterprise product. So in order to access any of the stuff we go over today, you must have the enterprise version of WiSys. We work with unlimited package types. So out of the box, and we're going to talk about this here shortly too as we discuss how to create package types. Out of the box, we give you cartons and pallets, right? So those are the two types of package types that come with our system, but you have the ability to add any package type you would like, and it's really minimal tailoring to change our out-of-the-box applications to fit your package type. So we have customers that use things, like containers, bottles, bags, really any type of package type somebody can come up with. We've seen a ton of different types used in the system, and we can handle any type that you need for your specific system. Then these package types allow you to assign a license plate number to several unique items, and that can work with serial and batch tracked items. So basically any item in your SAP system can be added to a package in WiSys. We can do any combination of these as well. So it could be a non-serial or batch tracked item. It could be a pallet with one non-serial and batch tracked, one serial tracked item, and one batch tracked item. You could have multiple serials of the same item, multiple different serial tracked items, so on and so forth. We can take care of any item in your system, can be combined onto a package. You can group those items together onto a license plate. And this is utilized in our shipping process. So anybody that uses Agility shipping or even Fulfillment Manager just to ship LTL, you ship packages out of there. So in the shipping process, we require you to ship a package with WiSys. So the two aspects of our system are very intertwined, shipping and packages. And again, this is all tracked in our own specific tables because it's not native to SAP Business One. And we'll talk about those tables in great detail today. All right, so now I'm going to jump over to Agility Explorer. So for those of you that aren't familiar, this is our desktop product, Agility Explorer. And this is, this allows you to access a lot of different information, grids, shipping, things like that from the desktop. So here I'm going to go to File. I'm going to go in Packing and Shipping, and then to my package types. And we're going to take a look at the package types that come with the system here. So again, out of the box, we provide you with cartons and pallets. Now we can handle any other package types, but these are the only two that come with the base product. Now, as you know, these are the only two package types that come with the base product. Any of our out of the box forms only utilize these two package types. So in order to use a package type of your own, we're going to add it in here and we're going to go through that whole process here in a minute. But then you would just need to tailor any of the applications that you intend to use to allow you to use those package types. So an application like transfer pallet would pass in the package type PLT at some point to identify that it's doing pallets, right? So if you create a package type like container, which we're going to create here in a minute, any of those forms like transfer pallet would just need tailored to pass in the package type CONT for container rather than PLT for pallet. So let's take a look here. With these package types, we also have the ability to add sizes. So you don't need to add, multiple different styles of pallets in here. You can have one package type of pallets and then have the different styles beneath with their individual sizes. So here I have a European pallet and just a standard vanilla pallet. Now, if we go to add a new package type down here at new type, we're going to click this arrow and we're going to select new type rather than new size. New size allows you to add one of those sizes to an existing pallet in the system. New type here, and we're going to create our new type of package, which is going to be container. So pretty standard too. Containers are utilized fairly often in WiSys, and typically our consultants name them as the pallet type CONT. So if you made something like a container yourself, I would try and stick to that uniform just because it makes it easier for our support team to recognize what you're using there. Then we need to fill in both our description and our display description. And again, the difference here between the two, description is what you're actually, that's any details you need assigned to the package in the background, where display description is what the user is going to see. So if you want the user to just see this as a container, but then in the background, you want it to say container, any other information about that, right? Return to shipper or something like that, you can put that in the description in the background here. We can set up a standard size, but we're not going to do that because of the ability to set up sizes after the fact. So here, real simple, CONT for container. We're just going to hit OK. And now that package type is added to our system. So now you can see I have cartons, pallets, and containers. But an important part of this process is we have to go and add it in SAP Business One as well. So I'm going to hit OK. I have my new package type. And now I'm going to open up B1. I'm going to go to modules. I'm going to go to modules, administration, setup, inventory, and package types. Now in here, you'll see I have PLT for my pallets, CTN for my cartons. But what I want to do here, of course, is I want to add a container. So I'm going to add CONT. Just going to go ahead and update that. And now that container package type is added both in my WiSys system and from within SAP Business One. Now, one thing to note here too, a recent product enhancement that we're looking into is the ability to just add that package type into Agility and have it right immediately back into SAP Business One. That's something we're exploring, but currently today the functionality is you'll have to add it into both systems. I hit OK there. Now my package type container is in the system and ready to be used. Pretty simple, really a two-step process there to add a package type. But like I mentioned before, if you want to use the out-of-the-box functionality that comes with WiSys, all of those forms and applications will need tailored very slightly to use your new package type simply by passing in, like in this case, that CONT for container rather than PLT for pallet or CTN for carton. All right, now I'm going to jump back over to Agility Explorer, We're going to take a look at what these packages look like in the system here. So if I go to sales AR, or actually if I go to inventory, we have a really nice grid in here called our inventory palette view. So taking a look at our inventory palette view here, the name is a bit misleading because it shows all package types, and we can see our package types here. So of course in my system, I had cartons and pallets. I haven't added any containers yet, so you're not going to see that show up in here. Now, if you were using a custom package type like a container and that was all you had, unless somebody accidentally added a pallet or carton, of course this would become like an inventory container view because it would only show the packages you have in your system, which should only be your custom package type if that's all you intend to use. Now, one important thing to note here, we have a package number that's going to be that license plate number that we discussed earlier. Now that is sequential from the moment you start with WiSys. So, your first package will be number 1, your 100th package will be number 100, and it does not duplicate based on the package type. So, we start at number 1 regardless of if it's a carton or a pallet. Then number 2, same thing, no matter what, your next package is number 2. So you can see that illustrated here by, we have carton 15, then carton 16, then 17, then our 18th package, we made a pallet, and then, of course it still goes to 18, but now the package type is different with pallet. The rest of this information is, pretty self-explanatory, pretty easy to understand. I mean, we're looking at the warehouse and the bin the pallet's sitting in, what items are on the pallet. Is it associated with a shipment? Is tracked here. Some aren't, which they would just have a 0 down here. Serial and batch data on the pallet. If the pallet was shipped out of our system, what date was it shipped? That type of information sits here in the system. So now that we have a little glimpse of what the information that's associated with a pallet looks like, let's go ahead and take a look at the tables here. So if I jump back over to my presentation, we'll get into our WiSys packaging tables. So our WiSys packaging tables, really you need to focus on 3 main tables, especially if you're trying to query data in the system and take a look at what packages you have, or if you need a way to customize a grid or customize a form using package information. These are the tables that you're going to need to look at. So first we have WSPKG. That's our package header table. So think of this very similar to something like a sales order in SAP Business One. The header is going to be the base information for the package as a whole. So that's going to be things like that package number that we just looked at, the bin the package is assigned to, the package type, that type of information. Then we have WSPKG line, which is going to be the line items for the package. So basically underneath of your package header there, you might have 1 to 50 lines for each package header. And those package lines are going to tell you what item is in the package, how many of the item, that type of information, what sales order it's associated to, any of that stuff. Then WSPKGSL is going to be your package line, serial and batch info. So again, this table here specifically relates to that package line instead of the header, and it tells you the serial and lot information for each item on the package line. This is going to be the smallest of the 3 tables, and it's simply going to go through, your serial and batch, manufacturer serial and batch, the quantity for each, things of that nature. So let's go ahead and take a look at those. We're going to pull up SQL Management Studio here. So I'm in SQL, not HANA, if this doesn't look familiar to you. And first, I'm going to just query that header table, WSPKG. So if we take a look at WSPKG here, one really important thing to note is the package ID. So what you notice here is we have an alphanumeric identification number for each package. And the reason we do that is you have the ability to reset your package numbering. So if every year you wanted to reset and start over at 1, you can do that, but we want to track the history of all the packages in the system so you can go back and audit if necessary. So, if you did that 10 years into your career with WiSys, if you reset every year and you have 10 pallet number 1s, then we have a unique package identifier for each so that we can still tell them apart in the system and we're not overwriting that package data. That's also what you're going to use to join tables together and things of that nature. You could, of course, use a package number if you never reset, but you open yourself up for more error, especially if it's a custom grid or form or something of that nature. Down the line, if you decide to reset, you would then break your grid. So we want to look at that package identification number rather than the actual license plate number we're using. And again, on here, pretty simple information that relates to the package as a whole. So package ID, package number, package type, your bin, your warehouse, that type of information. Now, if we jump over to package line, so what we're going to see here is each line gets a unique identifier, again, very similar to what the package received, and it still relates to that specific package. So we have this package ID here, and then we have 3 unique line identification numbers associated with that package ID, and those are lines 0, 1, and 2 for that package. Then we can get into all the information on the line, like the item description, the order the items for, all of that type of information there. And lastly, if we jump over to SL, our serial and lot table, what we'll see there is it only pulls that line because, it only needs to associate over to the specific line ID. So we know this serial number relates to that specific item code on that specific package line. And again, in here, we have the serial and lot, the manufacturer's serial and lot, effective date, expiration date, quantity, very basic information, a lot less than the other 2 tables. Now, it's important to note how these join together if you wanted to pull a query very similar to that grid that we were looking at before. That grid that we looked at pulled package header information, it pulled item line information, and it pulled serial and lot info. So if we want to see that all together, the tables join on those unique identification numbers again. So we would join our package line to our package table using that package identification number. And then we would join our serial and lot table to our line table using that package line ID. If we do that here, we see pretty easy, pulls the tables together. So here's all that header info. Then we can just scroll over here and we can get to our line info. And then way at the end here, we just have our serial and lot information. So those tables carry all of the information attached to each package in the system. But we do have the ability to audit and track packages in our system. So there's 2 tables worth noting for that as well. If you guys are using packages and you notice, oh, one accidentally got deleted in the system or the wrong package got added to a shipment, and you want to go track and see when that happened, who did it, those types of details, we can go in here and track that through these tables. So with WSPKG TRX, that's very much so focused on the specific transaction that occurs. So what we're looking at there is, okay, a transaction occurred. This is the package it occurred with. This is the time, the date, the person who did it, and what the specific transaction was, whether it's a, creation of the package, moving it to a new bin, adding a line, what have you. Now, a package audit is very similar information, but the display is very different. So a package audit has much more package information. And while you're looking at the same actions and the same action codes is the transaction table, it's showing more so what happens over the life cycle of a pallet. So you can see that pallet information, you can see how it changes with each transaction. So let's take a look at those and see what the difference is and understand how to use them a little bit better. So if we go here to WSPKG TRX, drop that in here. So what you'll see again here is it's more, focused on that single transaction that has occurred. So we have that transaction ID, we have the type. So in this case, it's A for add or create the package, B for bin change, L for adding a line, that type of information there. And you have your date, your time, we can see who did it, that type of information. There's not very much package information related to this. You can see a to bin, from bin, to location, from location, but it's more so focused on the transaction itself. Where the difference is very clear, if we look over here at the audit table, here we can see we have that, package ID right away. So we could relate this back to the package table if we wanted to join them or something along those lines. We can see the package number, the shipment number, so we can see, when it gets added to a shipment, when it's removed. Again, we have the bin and location settings there. So this is a little bit more focused on the high level package data and how it changes over time with those actions, where the other one's more so focused on the actions themselves. There's one other table we want to discuss here. So again, with the fact that these relate so strongly to our shipping product, we want to talk about WSPKG shipment and how that joins to the package table. So if I jump back in here and I just look at WSPKG, also here you can see it too, but what we see here is that there's a shipment number associated with all these packages. Some have a number, some have 0 if they're not associated with a shipment. So that's how we can join it to the shipment table. So if it's a package that is either on a shipment or has shipped in the system, we can join that to the shipment table there, and we can see all of the shipping details for that specific package. So it's a very simple query to do so because they both just utilize that shipment number. So now in this case, that shipment number becomes a way to group several packages to a shipment. And if I just drop that in right here, we can see, okay, I joined shipment table, shipment number to package table, shipment number. Oh, and if I execute here, we have our package information. If we pull over, we'll eventually get to our shipping information here, and we can just track all the shipping details for those specific packages. And that's just going to be something very important for anybody who ships, because our system, utilizes the packages in the shipping process. You ship a package, so you need to understand where to find the information for how that package was shipped, and any shipping details associated with that package. And that's a good segue for us to get into talking about the two types of packages in the WiSys system. So if you remember me mentioning here at the start of this call that we have two main styles of packages, and I don't mean package types like pallets and cartons, I mean actual styles of how the package operates. So those two styles are a shipping package and an inventory package. So a shipping package here, or these packages that are associated with a specific shipment, that shipment becomes that header information, right? So we have the ability to group together multiple pallets onto a shipment, and now that shipment becomes that highest level of grouping, so to speak, that we can group those pallets and move them. So if we wanted to, we could even move them by shipment number, or there's all these different things we can do by grouping them together by shipment number. So that's a shipping pallet. It's always associated with a shipment in the system. That becomes the highest piece of information, and it can be joined to other pallets through that shipment. While an inventory pallet will display simply a 0 here for shipment number. That's a pallet that's just sitting in your inventory. It's not associated with any shipment, and all that it's going to do in the system is sit in inventory and be moved around, unless later it is, of course, changed to be a part of a shipment or something along those lines. But that pallet is not tied to any shipment. A shipping pallet is tied to a shipment. So with these two packages, there's of course different ways to create each. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump back over here. We're going to sort this by most recent, our grid here, so that we can take a look as we add some packages to the system. So first, we're going to talk about how to add a standard inventory pallet. Again, a pallet that is not tied to any shipment in the WiSys system. So if we want to add a standard inventory pallet here, there's only two ways to do it out of the box. And notice I say pallet because we do not have any out of the box ways to add an inventory carton. So if you're creating an inventory package without tailoring any WiSys forms, it's a pallet. That's the only type of inventory package that we do out of the box. So we go over to pallets here, and we have two ways to do this. If I scroll all the way up to the top, we can do this through pallet builder and pallet build multiple. So first with pallet builder here, I'm just going to create a single new pallet. It's an inventory pallet. It will not be associated to any shipment. So how I do that is I can hit enter here to create a new pallet. I could also use that lookup up there to select an existing pallet and add items to a pallet that already exists in my system. But for this exercise, we're going to create a new one. I'm going to scan my item here. And I'm just going to find a bin that that's sitting in. It's important to note this is the bin the pallet will be created in. So if you want the pallet in a different bin in your system, you'll have to do a transfer after the fact. But whatever bin you pull the items from, that's where the pallet will be created in WiSys. So here I'm just going to go O5D. I'm just going to do a quantity of 5 and save that pallet. Now we see I added a pallet 10106 to my system. So if I go ahead back to my grid here and refresh, you'll see my pallet 1016, not associated to any shipment. And there it is. I just created a inventory pallet in my system. So pretty easy, just a couple scans there and I created one single pallet. Now, if I want to add multiple pallets out of the box, a lot quicker in this sense, I can go to pallet build multiple. And here, what I'm going to do, my first piece of information is going to be my item. Of course, you don't have the ability to add items to an existing pallet from within this form because we're building multiple pallets. Now I'm going to find that bin I'm creating my pallets in. I want one with a lot, so I'm going to go O5P. And I'm going to do 6 items per pallet. And I'm going to do 5 pallets. So here what I'm doing is I'm taking 30 items, I'm putting them on pallets in quantities of 6. So I'm basically telling the system I'm going to create pallets with 6 of A0001, and I'm going to do 5 total pallets of that. I save that here. So you'll see it automatically triggers a pallet label to print. I'm going to hit cancel there though, because printing is just going to slow us down for today's purposes. So that would have printed a label for all of those pallets. And now if I refresh my grid, we can go ahead and look here and I have 5 new pallets of 6 with that item not associated to a shipment. So those are the 2 out of the box ways to create inventory pallets. Pretty easy, pretty cut and dry. Something common though to be aware of, a lot of people, if any of you are just now getting started on the WiSys product, a lot of people when they first implement WiSys, they'll tailor a grid or something like that to mass create pallets. That's something fairly common. There's some easier ways to load pallets into your system that already exist in your warehouse that just, simply need put into the system. We can do that through grids and things of that nature. But if you want to use the out of the box functionality, we have that pallet build multiple, which is pretty quick if you're, doing pallets of one single item there. So now let's get into how to do shipping pallets. There's a few additional ways to do shipping pallets, a little bit more there in terms of functionality than what you have for pallet building for the inventory pallets. So first, we're going to do it from the desktop. There is a way to do this from the desktop. We're going to go to sales. We're going to go to our fulfillment manager here. So for anybody not familiar, this is our product where we manage all of our shipping. So with these shipping pallets, of course, they're attached to a shipment, so we can handle them from our shipment hub here, which is our fulfillment manager. So for this case, I'm going to just do a new shipment. Now there's nothing on the shipment to start with, and simply here from the desktop, I can create a carton or a pallet and add items to it. So I'm going to create a carton, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add an item. So if I select that here, I'm going to scan my order, I'm going to scan my item, and now it defaults to bin 05S because that's my staging bin. So of course, that's where I'm going to stage my shipment. I'm going to take my quantity to 1 and hit OK. And what we're going to see here, this is a serialized item. So I'm going to pull up my serial and lot builder here and select a serial through my serial lookup. Hit OK there. And now from Fulfillment Manager, we can see that shipment 249 that we just created now has this carton 10112, and it has a quantity of 1 of item FDO21, which is a serialized item. So if I refresh my grid, not only am I going to see a new carton here with a shipment number, it's also going to have that serial number tracked. We see it right here. So there's our carton 10112. We see our item, one single of that item, our shipment number, and our serial and batch information there. Now, I can also do this from the handheld pretty similarly and not too much more time consuming than how I can do it on the desktop. And it is worth mentioning too that this desktop version, a lot of our customers will use it as a ship station. So they'll have a desktop set up in their warehouse with a scanner. And what they'll simply do there is they'll scan the items and pack them from a desktop in their warehouse, so they still have it on the warehouse floor and it's still intertwined in that process there. But if we want to do this on the handheld, there's a couple different ways to do it, and we can do it for cartons and pallets out of the box on the handheld. So first, let's go ahead and look at pack pallets. So pack pallets allows us to pack items into a pallet and assign that pallet to a shipment all in one swoop, right? So we could add it to a new shipment by hitting enter here, and it would assign a new shipment. But for this case, I could have hit clear there. I didn't need to hit close. But for this case, we're going to use our existing shipment. So we're going to use this shipment 249 and add a pallet to it. So I'm going to do 249 here. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit enter here for a new pallet. I'm going to scan my order. I'm going to scan my item. We're just going to do that A0001 again and find a bin. Let's see, we'll just do this bin. Now I'm just going to do 2 of that item, hit enter here, and we'll see that shipment number 249. Oh, it also is prompting for labels again. I have a prompt on here so I can identify how many labels I want to print. We're going to skip that again. All right, and now what we see is shipment 249 now has this pallet 10113. So if we jump back over here and refresh our shipment, we'll see our pallet added here to the top. There's that 10113, 2 of our item. And again, if we jump back to our pallet view and refresh, we'll see it added here at the top. It's non-serial batch tracked item. Now we can do the exact same thing for our carton, very similar. Again, very quick. So in this case, we have to jump back to distribution. Anything cartons related is going to be in distribution, not pallets. Scroll down to the bottom, we have pack cartons here. And we're just going to follow the same process. So again, I could create a new shipment, but I want to use our existing shipment 249. So I'm just going to go ahead and enter it in. Then I'm going to hit enter after that for a new carton. Again, if I didn't hit enter there, I could add items to an existing carton. So I could do this 10112 and add a few items to that if I didn't want to create a new one. But in this case, I'm just going to make a new one here. I'm going to scan my order. I'm going to scan my item. Find a bin real quick. So the exact same process as pack pallets. And I'm just going to enter 2 again. And now we have this carton 10114. And if I go ahead and refresh my shipment, you'll see that carton added to the system as well on the shipment. And we can refresh our pallet view and you will see the exact same thing. So basically I created this same pallet as a carton in this case, and now it's added to that shipment there as well. So now they're all residing on shipment 249. So those are the ways to create a shipping pallet from scratch onto one of these forms. And it's just as easy to undo the steps too if it was mistakenly created or wrongly created. So in this case, we'll just look at our pallet that we built, this pallet 10113. And if we jump back in here and scroll down, we'll see that we have a form called Unpack Pallets. And what Unpack Pallets does is it retraces the steps that we did in Pack Pallets. So basically what we're going to do is, where with Pack Pallets, we created a carton or a pallet, we created a pallet, added items to the pallet, and then put it onto the shipment. In this case, we're going to remove it from the shipment. We're going to destroy the pallet, and we're going to move the items back, to the staging bin as singular items that are no longer attached to a pallet. So if I go ahead and do my shipment 249 again, and I do my pallet 10113, it's going to default to my staging bin. It's going to tear that pallet down. So what we'll see here when we refresh is that pallet will no longer be in our system. There were no items on it anymore after I did this unpack pallets. So all the items were removed, the pallet will be removed. And then if we refresh Fulfillment Manager, we'll also see that the pallet number is removed from the shipment. So let's jump over here. So this pallet 10113 will disappear. Perfect. And if we take a look at our shipment, it will also drop off of our shipment here. So, and there we go. Very easy. Same thing with cartons. There's an unpack cartons form, and we can just retrace our steps and undo the exact transaction that we just did. Now, I'm sure you're wondering, because I mentioned it a little bit before, if that's how you create an inventory pallet and how you create a shipping pallet, those are the two processes. Isn't there a way to take an inventory pallet and put it onto a shipment? And the answer is yes. So if we go to our handheld here and go back, we will see a form called load pallets here at the top. What load pallets does is it loads a pallet onto a shipment. So it takes that inventory pallet, assigns it to a shipment, and now it becomes a shipping pallet in that case, right? So we're going to do it a little differently this time. We're going to create a new shipment by hitting enter. Then we're going to scan in our order here. I'm using a different order this time, 1059. I'm going to go ahead and scan my item. And now, if you noticed earlier, I made several pallets of this A0001 with 6 items on them when I use pallet build multiple. That's exactly how much we need to fulfill this order here. So I'm just going to go into my system, and if I jump back over to my grid, so here's one that's unassociated with a shipment, 6 of A001. So this will satisfy the order. So when I go back over to the handheld, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull in this pallet 10108. I'm going to pull that to the shipment, and that will satisfy the order for me. So that's what we're going to do, 10108, hit enter. And now we'll see our new shipment number will be created at the top, 250. So first, if I go here and refresh, we'll see this pallet will now be associated with 250, and it will receive a load date. The load date is important for tracking information as well, because when we create an inventory pallet from scratch, or we create a shipping pallet from scratch, we're never changing the style of pallet that they are. But when we load a pallet, we're changing it from an inventory pallet to a shipping pallet. So we want to track the date that we did that, so we can go back through the transaction logs and see, okay, on February 21st, we changed that pallet to become a shipping pallet. So we'll see a load date added and a shipment added to this line. And there it is, shipment 250. There's our load date of today. And if we refresh Fulfillment Manager to be that shipment 250, we will see our pallet there added to the shipment. So again, very similar to pack pallets and pack cartons as far as how easy it is, how many scans it takes, except in this case, you're taking an existing package and putting it onto a shipment. But also very similar to pack cartons and pack pallets, we can simply undo the process too with our unload application. So what unload does is it removes a pallet from a shipment. So I could actually take a shipping pallet I created and turn it into an inventory pallet by unloading. But in this case, I'm just going to use this pallet that we just used to show you how that looks. So I'm going to go to my shipment here of 250. Going to select the pallet I want to remove from a shipment and make into an inventory pallet, which will be this 10108. Now I'm going to select the bin I'm going to move it to. So in this case, again, with retracing our steps, before what we did was we took a pallet that was sitting in inventory, we added it to a shipment, which transferred it to our staging bin. And then from there, we were able to create that shipment as well. So we created shipment 250 and we transferred the pallet to the shipment and to the shipment bin. So what we're doing here is we're retracing our steps, deleting the shipment, transferring the pallet to a new bin, and then removing the pallet from the shipment as well. So the shipment will pallet. Go ahead and just select a bin here. We'll do this 0517. And then we're going to select a date and time. Also important to note that load date that we talked about before will never go away. It can be overridden if the pallet is loaded again, but we keep that load date so that you can go back and track and say, oh, this was added to a shipment on that date. But what we do here is we add a new date. This isn't displayed on my grid, but in our tables, this would be the unload date. And we can go back and look at the date that we removed it from the shipment and compare that to the date that we loaded it on the shipment. So I'm just going to go ahead to my calendar here and select today's date. And of course, if you don't want your employee selecting a date here, you could just force it to pass in today's date. We save that there. Now, first, we deleted the shipment. So if I refresh here, we're going to see that there's no items on the shipment. The shipment is deleted in the system and no longer exists. So shipment 250 not found. It doesn't exist in the system anymore because it has nothing on it. And if we take a look at that pallet 10108 again, we will see that it drops off of the shipment, but it maintains its load date and it moved to the bin that we selected 0517 there. And again, this load date stays. I don't have it displayed on the grid here, but we assigned it an unload date in the table. So if we need to go back and track, we can see the date an employee put it on a shipment, the date they removed it, all of that information is stored. So that's how you create a shipping pallet, you create an inventory pallet, and how you change a pallet's type from a shipping pallet to an inventory pallet. Now, that's the main functionality with creating pallets, but we want to talk about inner packs today too, to gloss over it because it's an underutilized function here in our product that I think a lot of our customers don't realize we can do. So if we jump back over to Fulfillment Manager here, we're going to create a new shipment. So 251 is our new shipment, and we're going to do an inner pack. So what an inner pack is a way for us to double down on this packaging layer, right? So doing an inner pack, we can pack a package into another package. So here, I'm going to do it with a carton. I'm going to pack the carton onto a pallet. So first I'll select pallet. That's going to be my parent item, my parent package. That's going to be the top level of information there that other packages are grouped onto. Then I'm going to select my carton. And then we need to add items to the carton. So I'm going to go ahead and select add item here and just follow the same process I did before to do this from the desktop. So I'll scan in an order, scan an item. This is going to be my serialized item again. It defaults in my staging bin. I hit 1 and then I'll have to identify my serial here as well. Okay, so now what you see here is I packed a carton with an item onto a pallet. So I doubled down on that packaging layer. Now, when we see this, we wonder, what does this look like in the tables? Because of course, how do we associate that back to the pallet it's packed on? So if we jump over here to our tables and we take a look at WSPKG, we have a field here called parent ID, which tends to be null. It's usually null. That's the parent package's ID. So if we go ahead and we do a search for our carton, so let's just see here. Let me see that package number real quick on my carton. 10116. So if we go ahead and query that, what we'll see here is that parent ID is filled in with one of those alphanumeric package identification numbers. Now that is going to be the package identification number of the pallet that it's sitting on. So in this case, 10115. So if I packed 100 cartons onto this pallet, they would all have the same information passed into parent ID, while this pallet has no information on its line relating to the cartons that are packed onto it, but those cartons tie back to the pallet, of course. So if I jump back here to our table and I just copy this and put that into my query, Oh, did I not copy that? All right, I dropped that into my query, and I'm going to change this from package no to package ID, again, because it's that alphanumeric identification number. And I execute that here, we're going to see our pallet 10115 come back. So there it is. So that's how they relate. They are interjoined there by that parent ID, and we can interpack, any package onto a package utilizing that parent ID. So I'm sure you're wondering though too, since we went over how to create a package type, how does that get set up in the settings, right? So if we go back into our package type settings here, let's say we want to add a package type called a bottle. And every time we have a bottle, we typically pack those into cartons. Now, maybe sometimes we don't do it, but a lot of the time we pack bottles into cartons. So I'm going to go to new palette, new package type, select new type. I'm going to do a bottle. I'm just going to call that BTL. So now what we see here is parent package. See, currently it has no parent associated. If we looked at carton, a carton would have a parent type of a pallet. So what we want to do here is say, okay, we want to pack a bottle into a carton. So what we would do is we would put the parent type as a carton there. We could require the relationship if we wanted to, which would mean that every time we pack a bottle to ship it out of the system, it needs to be packed into a carton. But for this case, we're not going to do that because sometimes we might not want to do that. So we would hit OK here. And well, I didn't add in descriptions, but we would hit OK there and we would have the ability to pack bottles into cartons. And again, when we talk about doubling down on the package layer here, we could pack a bottle into a carton and then a carton onto a package or onto a pallet. It all attaches through those parent IDs. So we have the ability to just interjoin packages utilizing that. So that's how you set up a parent package for an interpack. Again, to have it set up in your system, doubling down on the packaging layer like so. So those are the main things that I wanted to cover today. That's kind of the ins and the outs of the entire packaging layer and what it can do. It's really up to our customers and the customer process for, what it will do and what it needs to do to satisfy your needs. So if we run back through what we covered today, we did that little overview of what the WiSys packaging layer is and some key information there, as well as the Agility Pallets product and how you can obtain that again, which is through our enterprise. If you have Agility Enterprise, you have access to pallets. If you don't have access to pallets, you just need to purchase Agility Enterprise. We discussed how Agility handles those different types of packages like a pallet, carton, bottle, container, etc., and how to set those up in the system. And then we went through that package data there and the WiSys packaging tables and how that really looks in the back end. And again, those are three main tables that you need to focus on if you're trying to query package information from WiSys, which is WSPKG for the header, WSPKG line for the individual items, and WSPKG SL for the serial and lot information. Then we went through and discussed those two main types of packages that we utilize in Agility and how to create them, which is an inventory package, which is a package that just sits in your inventory, not associated to shipping, and a shipment package, which is always tied to a shipment. And then lastly, we went through interpacking and how to double down on the packaging layer and pack a package into another package. So those are really all the ins and outs of the packaging layer. There's a lot you can do here. If you couldn't tell, there's a lot of different ways to tailor or tweak the solution to fit your packaging needs. So if you have questions on that and you need additional enablement, you can feel free to reach out to me. A lot of cases I may point you to your partner or your consultant, but sometimes if it's an easy question, I might be able to just pass on some information myself. So feel free to reach out, and either way, I'll get you to the right place. I'm sure that a session like this, there's a lot of information covered, so I'm sure it kind of makes some questions rise up on how you can utilize the packaging layer. But it looks like we have about 10 minutes left. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat and I'll try and answer them quickly here before we finish up. But If not, thank you guys for attending. I hope you got a lot out of this. This is, one of the biggest parts of our product, and it's a fun part to show. So I hope you learned something today. I'm just going to stick around for another 4 or 5 minutes here, see if any questions come in. All right, we have a question here in the chat. Let's see here. Yes, that's a great question. So the question was, can we have pallets forming or created out of the production process? And yes, we can. So I didn't show it today, but I can give you a little look real quick. I might not have good data in my system to actually do so, but if we go over to production here on the handheld, we have pallet production. So what pallet production does is it allows you to just produce directly to a pallet. So in this case, we would hit enter here for a new pallet, and then we would do our production order. And when we fulfill our production order, let's say it's 100 of that item I was using, that A001, we could create a pallet of 100 of those items, right? So you would go through this process for each pallet you're making. So if your production order was 500 and you're doing 100 per pallet, you would of course just have to do this 5 times and make your 5 individual pallets. But yes, we have the ability to do that. And then of course, these are going to be inventory pallets when they're done. They won't be associated to a shipment. If you want to put them on a shipment after that, you would then just have to use the load pallets function. Very good question. Okay, let's see here. It looks like we have another one. Okay, so if a pallet is shrink wrapped every 10 minutes, how do we create the stickers or labels all at once or one at a time manually? So that's a good question there. There's different ways to do that. And there's a lot of different things that can be tailored for things like labeling, right? So I guess, there's a lot of different ways to answer that question. So number one, out of the box on the handheld, if you wanted to trigger the handheld to print, so let's say you just wrapped it and you want to tell the handheld, hey, I need to, go ahead and print that label. You would do that one at a time. You would print it for that individual pallet there. But if you knew, okay, I'm shrink wrapping, 10 pallets, we could easily tailor an application where, maybe you just scan the barcode for each pallet before you wrap it, and it triggers a print for each individual barcode. We could have a grid where if you know you're wrapping these pallets on this day, we could have it print those labels for you the day that you're wrapping those pallets. You could get a stack of labels to relabel each pallet you print. So out of the box, it would be one at a time, but there's a lot of opportunity there to tailor the product to streamline that process and print out those labels, quickly and efficiently there. Let me take a look here and see if there's any else. If I miss any questions too, feel free to email them to me because it's a little hard sometimes to navigate the question chat on GoToWebinar. It's not the best user interface. Here, I think I have another one here. Can we print out ASN kind of SCC label with batch in them? Yes, we can. So when it comes to SCCs, ASNs, all that stuff, we have a lot of different capabilities for that. So of course, my last session, if you weren't here for that, was on Label Designer. So that will be up on YouTube. I plan to do feature sessions on our serial and lot builder as well. There's a lot of different ways to utilize our product to create things like SSCC barcodes and stuff of that nature. But short answer, yes, we can set up those labels to, automatically print with the production process relatively easily. I mean, we would do that utilizing our label designer, and we would go from there. But your like batch information and things like that can be manually entered in areas if needed, or other specific barcoding information. We can pull that from SAP if you have it set up as a barcode on the item master. There's really a lot of different ways to pull labeling information, but for that specific question, yes, we can do that. It would be done through Label Designer, and we could set it up to print directly from this application here, that pallet production application, so that right when you finish, it would automatically print that label out for you. All right. I think that is all the questions that I see. Yeah, I believe that's all the questions we have here in the chat. So those were great questions. I appreciate the all the feedback. If anybody else comes up with any questions, or if I did miss one, because like I said, it's not the easiest tool to navigate here, feel free to send me an email with your questions, and I can get back to you very, very quickly on those. But and if you think of anything else, just reach out and let me know. I appreciate you guys attending today, though, and any other questions on the packaging layer, reach out to me, and if I can't just answer them for you, I'll get you to the right place.